I remember the exact pattern of the shadows on the ceiling of our bedroom. It was a Thursday night, nothing particularly unusual about the day or the week leading up to it. Alyssa and I had opened a bottle of wine after dinner. We were relaxed, the conversation was easy, the connection was there, and everything was moving exactly the way it was supposed to. And then right in the middle of it, the system just dropped offline. The physical response vanished entirely. I didn't lose interest, I didn't lose desire for my wife, but my body simply stopped cooperating. I lay there, staring at those shadows above the bed, and immediately did what a lot of men do in that split second of humiliation. I manufactured an excuse. I blamed the long week, the second glass of wine, a heavy meal. I talked my way around what had just happened because I simply did not have the vocabulary to face it honestly. Alyssa didn't make a big deal out of it. She is incredibly emotionally grounded. She just shifted closer, put her hand on my chest, and told me it was fine, that we were just tired. But in my head, it wasn't fine at all. In my head, a massive alarm was going off. I had spent decades relying on the fact that when I demanded something from my physical machinery, it delivered without question. When you are in your 30s or 40s, the engine turns over the second you turn the key. But that night, I turned the key and heard nothing but a click. The distance that created over the next few weeks was entirely my doing. I started going to bed a little later than her, finding reasons to stay up answering emails in the living room, just to avoid the possibility of the system failing again. I was hiding in plain sight. Look, I know exactly how many of us are carrying this specific quiet panic around in our daily lives. Losing your physical response unexpectedly when you are right in the middle of the moment is something most men over 50 will face at least once, and nobody prepares us for how isolated it makes us feel. We are going to talk about exactly what is happening in the background of your body when the system drops offline like that. And I am going to show you what I had to learn the hard way so you can stop wondering if your best years are permanently behind you. The easiest thing to do in that situation is to reach for a quick fix. The pharmaceutical industry has built an absolute empire on men experiencing that exact moment of failure and panicking. The blue pill seems like the most logical answer in the world. You have a pressure problem, so you take a chemical hammer to force the pipes open. For a long time, I thought that was just the inevitable contract we signed by getting older. You hit a certain age, the warranty expires, and you start taking the pills. But when I finally started looking at how the machinery actually operates, I realized that taking a synthetic pill to force an erection is like putting a massive industrial pressure pump on a house with rotten plumbing. You might get water out of the faucet today, but you are completely ignoring why the lines are failing in the first place, and eventually the pipes are going to burst. What was actually happening to me wasn't a sudden, mysterious loss of manhood. It was a severe breakdown in neurological signaling and microcirculation. An erection is essentially a hydraulic process driven by a very delicate signal from the brain. When you are younger, that signal punches through daily stress, physical fatigue, and poor diet like a freight train. But past 50, the infrastructure changes. The smaller blood vessels become rigid and less flexible. The baseline level of tension in your nervous system stays elevated because of decades of accumulated stress. So when a moment of intimacy starts, the brain sends the signal to dilate the vessels, but the physical pathways just can't execute the command quickly enough. And the second you notice the delay, the brain registers a threat and floods the system with adrenaline. Adrenaline is the exact chemical that shuts down blood flow to the extremities so you can fight or run away. It is a self-fulfilling cycle of mechanical failure. I knew I had to rebuild the infrastructure from the ground up, and it started with what I was doing in the immediate hours before sleep. For years, my standard wind-down routine consisted of sitting on the edge of the bed looking at quarterly projections or answering final high-stakes emails from the sales team. I was keeping my nervous system locked in a state of high alert right up until the minute I closed my eyes. The human body cannot repair vascular tissue, balance hormone profiles, or prepare for physical intimacy when it is convinced it is sitting in a boardroom defending a difficult contract. The first major change I made was establishing a hard, non-negotiable cutoff for any input that demanded a defensive response. An hour before sleep, the phone stays in the kitchen. I stop consuming information that requires me to solve a problem. The change in my physical baseline was not immediate, but within 3 weeks I noticed I was waking up feeling like the engine had actually cooled down overnight, and my resting physical tension was significantly lower. I stopped bringing the war into the bedroom. The second adjustment had to do with mechanical demand on the lower half of the body. In the corporate world, and just in modern life generally, we tend to sit far too much, and the pelvic floor and lower body circulation pay the heaviest price for that convenience. The pipes in that region become stagnant and sluggish. I realized I needed to force the body to push heavy blood volume into those tissues regularly, not just when I wanted an erection. I started incorporating heavy resistance work focused entirely on the legs, along with intentional, brisk walking on steep inclines. I wasn't doing it to build muscle to look good in the mirror. I was doing it to demand vascular adaptation. When you force the large, demanding muscles of the lower body to work hard, the heart has no choice but to push blood through the entire pelvic region, clearing out the stagnation and forcing the microvessels to dilate, stretch, and strengthen. It brought back a sense of physical solidity and groundedness that I hadn't even realized I was slowly losing over the years. If these conversations about how we actually maintain the machinery after 50 are making sense to you, take a second to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. There's a man out there right now staring at his own ceiling, wondering if his body is giving up on him, feeling completely alone, and your interaction with this video helps this information find its way to his screen. We have to start having these maintenance conversations without the quiet shame attached to them. The third change was perhaps the most critical for the signaling process, and it had to do with the physical mechanics of how I was breathing at night. Somewhere in my late 40s, I had become a mouth breather while I slept without even realizing it. When you breathe through your mouth, you completely bypass the nasal cavity, which happens to be the primary factory for nitric oxide in the human body. Nitric oxide is the essential gas that tells your blood vessels to relax, expand, and allow blood to flow. It is the core chemical trigger for every erection you have ever had. By taping my mouth at night, or simply making a very conscious, disciplined effort to breathe entirely through my nose during the evening, I was slowly resaturating my bloodstream with the exact compound required to keep the piping flexible and responsive. The return of reliable, consistent morning wood was the first undeniable indicator that the internal signaling pathway was finally repairing itself. But I also have to be straightforward with you about the reality of the rebuilding process. Changing my routine, adjusting my mechanical movement, and fixing my breathing moved the needle significantly, but I still felt like the system needed a stronger foundation to rely on, especially on the inevitable days when heavy stress was unavoidable. I had drawn a hard line in the sand that I wasn't going to touch the synthetic pharmaceutical options, so I started looking heavily into what actually supports the vascular and signaling pathways naturally. I ended up finding a natural formula that I incorporated into my daily morning routine, and it became the missing piece of the maintenance puzzle. It contains epimedium, which works along the exact same pathways as the conventional medications to keep the blood vessels open, but it does it naturally, supporting the signal without the violent artificial hammer effect. It also includes alpha-lipoic acid, which acts as a powerful antioxidant specifically for the smaller vessels, the exact ones that need to be clear and flexible for the flow to actually reach where it needs to go. I noticed a profound, steady shift in how reliably my body responded once the internal lines were being actively supported. I put a link to the exact formulation I use down in the description if you want to look at the research and see if it makes sense for your own daily maintenance routine. What we are really talking about here is not just performing in the bedroom for 10 minutes. We are talking about not feeling like a stranger inside your own skin. When your physical responses become unpredictable, it chips away at the quiet, foundational confidence that bleeds into every other area of your life. You start second-guessing yourself in difficult conversations, in your work environment, and in the quiet moments with your relationship. Reclaiming that predictability is about taking ownership of the infrastructure. The body you have right now is perfectly capable of operating with power and vitality, but you cannot treat a 60-year-old engine like a 20-year-old rental car, ignore the warning lights, and expect it to never stall on the highway. We have to stop waiting for the system to break down completely before we decide to look under the hood and do the work. You are not the only man dealing with this unexpected drop in pressure. And the worst possible thing you can do is suffer in silence and put distance between yourself and the person lying next to you. Drop a comment below and let me know, have you ever noticed the connection between your stress levels during the day and how your body responds at night? Let's get that conversation going, because it is the most important one we can have. The cost of ignoring this isn't just a few frustrating nights and some wounded pride. The real cost is the gradual erosion of intimacy over years, and the quiet, heavy resentment that builds in a house when you stop communicating about what is really going on. The changes in routine, the vascular demand, and the natural support I mentioned are just tools to help you rebuild the bridge back to your partner. The link to the formula is in the description and the pinned comment below. Take a look at the compounds, read how they support the system, and make an informed decision for your own health. Many men aren't broken. They are just ignoring the wrong things.